He touched her soul in a way no one else could, the blind human and the alien outcast. In the vast unfamiliar world, he walked alone, his steps steady despite his blindness. He had always been different from the others, living in a world of silence and darkness. His eyes, once full of life, now stared blankly ahead, but his other senses were sharp, his hearing, touch, and intuition guiding him through life. He had learned to navigate a world he could never see, and though it was a lonely existence, he had made peace with it. On this particular day, something felt different. As he walked through the dense alien forest, a soft, almost imperceptible sound reached his ears. It was like a whisper, a brush of air that didn't belong to the wind. He paused, tilting his head slightly, trying to make sense of it. It came again, a faint, rhythmic sound, almost like a heartbeat. He could feel his curiosity growing. He stepped forward, following the sound until his hand brushed against something smooth and cold. His fingers lingered for a moment, tracing the surface. It was the most delicate feeling he had ever encountered, like the skin of a creature that didn't belong to this world. He froze, realizing this was not something he had encountered before. His touch had connected with something or someone, unfamiliar and yet strangely familiar. The being before him was unlike any human or creature he had ever known. She was tall, her body sleek and ethereal with skin that shimmered in the dim light of the forest. Her features were otherworldly, like the perfect blend of elegance and mystery. He could not see her face, but he could feel her presence, the way her body seemed to radiate with an energy that was both unsettling and captivating. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with a strange tension. She had always kept to the shadows, hiding from the world that had exiled her. Her kind had cast her out long ago, and she had learned to keep her distance from all others. But this human, this blind man, had unknowingly pierced the wall she had built around herself. His touch was unlike any she had ever felt. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. How could someone who could not see her, could not even comprehend her true nature, make her feel like this? She had lived for centuries in isolation, fearing rejection from everyone she had ever met. Yet here was a human who had touched her soul with nothing more than a fleeting brush of his fingers. He didn't even know she was there, but somehow, he had connected with her in a way no one else ever had. He slowly withdrew his hand, the sensation of her presence still lingering in the air. The silence between them was palpable. He had not expected anything like this. His life, built on the certainty of darkness, had just been shifted by a single touch. His heart raced with confusion and curiosity. Who was she? What was she? And why did she feel so familiar? She stood there, uncertain of what to do next. The human was blind, unable to see the true form of what stood before him, but he had touched something deep inside her, something she had buried for so long. She had no idea why, but she felt drawn to him, as if his presence alone was enough to undo the walls she had spent years building. The wind rustled the leaves above them, and she realized it was time to leave. Her instinct told her to run, to escape the danger of being seen, but her feet stayed rooted to the ground. There was something about this man, something she couldn't explain, that made her hesitate. She wasn't sure if it was his touch, or the way he had connected with her on some unspoken level. But for the first time in centuries, she didn't feel the need to hide. For the blind human, the encounter left him with more questions than answers. He had always trusted his senses, and his senses told him that this moment was something extraordinary. But what did it mean? What had he just touched? And why did he feel as though he had uncovered something far greater than he could ever understand? The quiet of the forest seemed to deepen, as if holding its breath along with them. Neither of them moved. Time stretched out in the space between them, fragile and uncertain. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. And as the last rays of sunlight faded, the human stood alone once again, the memory of the touch still warm against his skin, while the alien outcast watched from the shadows, uncertain of what the future held. But one thing was clear. Whatever had just passed between them was far from ordinary. Days passed, but the memory of that moment never left him. The touch, the feeling of something extraordinary, lingered in his mind like an echo. His life, which had always been predictable and quiet, was now filled with an unsettling curiosity. He knew he had touched something that day, but what? Who was she? What was she? These questions swirled around him constantly, even as he tried to focus on his daily routines. As time went on, the blind human found himself returning to the same spot in the forest, almost without thinking. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was as if his feet led him there on their own. The familiar path felt different now, as if the forest itself was calling him. Every day he hoped, no, he needed, to encounter the being who had stirred something deep within him. It had been 3 days since the first encounter, but today felt different. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fresh leaves, and the wind carried a strange warmth. As he walked, his steps faltered for a brief moment, a sense of déjà vu rushing through him. He didn't know what it was, but his body felt a pull, urging him toward the very spot where they had met. He stopped in his tracks, his senses on high alert. There it was again, the faint sound of movement, like the rustling of fabric or a breath held too long. He could feel the air shift around him as though something or someone was near. His heart pounded in his chest. Could it be? Was she here? For a long moment he stood still, waiting, listening. Then, as if the world had momentarily paused, he felt it, a soft touch on his arm. He stiffened but didn't pull away. It wasn't forceful or threatening. It was gentle, almost as if she were trying to communicate without words. Her touch sent a jolt through him, more powerful than before. "Who are you?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew she was there, just out of sight, but he had no idea how to reach her. He felt the weight of the silence that followed, the tension of her hesitation. He wasn't sure what had made him speak, but something about the connection he had felt that day, the inexplicable pull, compelled him to ask. A long pause followed, and he could almost feel her pondering whether to respond. Her presence was still near, but she didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken thoughts. It was as though she was deciding something important, weighing whether or not to share her truth. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft and uncertain, but with a rawness that carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her words tinged with something dark, fear, regret, or perhaps something deeper, something older. "You don't understand." Her words didn't scare him. They intrigued him. The mystery of who she was only deepened with each passing moment. "I don't understand, no," he admitted, feeling the oddity of the situation. "But I want to. You've touched something inside me, something I can't explain." He paused, feeling his pulse quicken. "You don't have to hide from me." Her silence stretched out again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet space between them, one that felt sacred in a way he couldn't articulate. He stood there, unsure of what to do next, but not willing to leave. He had to know more. "I am not like you," she said finally, her voice almost breaking. There was a vulnerability in her words, a rare honesty that made him want to reach out to her, to offer something. Comfort, understanding, anything. "I was cast out by my own people. I don't belong here in your world. I don't belong anywhere." She let out a small, pained sigh, and he felt the weight of her words settle into the space between them. The human stood unmoving, trying to grasp the full extent of her revelation. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the tension in the air so thick it was almost tangible. "I don't care about where you belong," he said softly, surprising even himself. "What matters is that you're here now. And I'm here too." Her silence seemed to deepen, as though she were torn between her instincts to run and the pull of something she had never known before. She had never allowed anyone to come so close to her. Not after everything she had been through, not after the exile. But this human, this blind man, was different. He could not see her, yet he understood her in a way no one ever had. "I'm afraid," she whispered, the words almost lost in the wind. "Afraid of what you might see if you really know who I am. Afraid of what you might do if you see me for what I truly am." Her words hung in the air, and the human felt the weight of her fear pressing down on him. He understood more than she realized. He knew what it was like to be different, to be isolated in a world that didn't understand. He had lived that life for as long as he could remember. "I don't need to see you to understand," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I feel you, and that's enough for me." Her breath caught, and for the first time she felt something stir inside her that she had long thought buried. It was hope. A small, fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this human might be the one to break through the wall she had spent centuries building. The human smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see it. "I don't know what you're afraid of, but I promise you this, I won't turn away. Not from you. And with that simple declaration, something shifted between them. A bond had been formed, one that went beyond sight and understanding. It was a connection that was rooted deep within their souls, something neither of them could have predicted, yet both of them needed. The days that followed felt like a blur. The human continued to return to the forest, drawn by an invisible force that he couldn't explain. Every time he approached the spot where they had met, there was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if the world itself was waiting for something to unfold. And every time she was there, waiting for him in the shadows just out of reach. It was strange. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her presence so clearly, as though she was right next to him. The connection they had formed was growing stronger with each passing day, but the more he came to know her, the more questions arose. Who was she really? What had she meant when she said she didn't belong here? The human had sensed the fear in her voice when she had spoken of herself, the deep-rooted pain of being cast out. He knew she was hiding something important, but what was it? And why was she so afraid to let him in? One afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the human stood once again in the clearing. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth. It was a moment of stillness, and for the first time he felt the weight of the silence between them. "Why do you stay hidden?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying across the empty space. "Why not show me who you really are?" For a long moment there was no answer. His words seemed to hang in the air unanswered. And then finally he heard a soft rustling in the bushes nearby. He turned instinctively toward the sound, his senses alert, knowing it was her. She had come, but this time something was different. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. There was an undeniable intensity in the atmosphere, as if a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. She stepped into the clearing, her figure outlined against the dimming sky, but this time something about her was different. Her form, usually so graceful and fluid, now seemed more angular. Her skin, once smooth and glowing, was now marked with faint, strange patterns, as if her body had been marked by something beyond this world. She looked more alien than she ever had before. For the first time, the human felt a chill run through him. He knew there was something she had been hiding, but this was something else. Something far deeper, far darker. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment they shared a silence filled with understanding. She could sense his hesitation, the unspoken questions in his mind. She took a deep breath, the sound shaky, as if she were steeling herself for something. Then in a voice barely above a whisper she spoke. "I was not always like this," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I was once human, or at least I was close to it. My people, they were not like me. They were different, but they were not always kind. I was cast out, exiled, and left to wander alone because of what I am now." The human's heart sank. He had suspected she was hiding something, but this was far more than he could have imagined. "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Her eyes flickered, a brief flash of pain crossing her face. "I was changed. By a power beyond me, I became something else. Something that no one could accept. Something dangerous." The human took a step forward, his curiosity and compassion driving him to understand. "Dangerous? But you don't seem dangerous to me." She shook her head, a sad, bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You don't understand. You don't know what I've become. The power that courses through me, it's not natural. I can't control it, and I fear what I could do if I lose control." The human felt a pang of sympathy for her, and yet he was also filled with a sense of awe. The mystery surrounding her only deepened. What kind of power could turn someone so beautiful, so graceful, into something feared and exiled? "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly, stepping closer to her. "I'm here, and I don't think you're dangerous. I think you're just different." For a moment she didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the ground as if lost in her own thoughts. Finally, she lifted her eyes to meet his, a tear glistening in the corner of her eye. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice barely audible. "But when I touch you, when I'm near you, it's as if I'm not the same. It's like something in me awakens, and I don't know how long I can control it." The human could feel the weight of her words, the truth behind them. It was clear she was struggling with something far more complex than he had ever imagined. He had thought she was just an alien outcast, hiding from the world. But now he realized she was hiding from something far more dangerous, herself. He reached out, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't run from you. I'm here, and I'll help you." Her eyes softened at his words, but doubt still lingered in her gaze. "Can you truly help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Or will you too fear what I am?" The human stood there, his heart heavy with the weight of her question. He didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. Whatever she had become, whatever power she possessed, he couldn't walk away now. She needed him, even if she didn't fully understand why. "I don't know what you are," he said softly, "but I know that you don't deserve to be alone." And with that, the connection between them deepened further. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain. There was no turning back. The secrets she had kept hidden were slowly being revealed, and with each new truth they drew closer to something neither of them could yet understand. But they were ready to face it together. The days that followed were both intense and surreal. The human's world had become a strange blend of quiet curiosity and growing tension. The alien, once distant and hidden, now walked beside him in the shadows, sharing moments that neither of them could quite explain. Every day the human returned to the forest, hoping to see her again, hoping to understand more of what had happened that night. She had become a constant in his life, a presence that filled the empty spaces of his mind. But as the days passed, he could sense her growing discomfort. There was something she wasn't telling him, something that lingered in the space between them, unspoken and unresolved. One evening, as dusk fell upon the forest, a storm began to roll in. The air was thick with moisture, the sky heavy with dark clouds. The winds howled through the trees, sending branches swaying and leaves scattering across the forest floor. It was a strange, almost oppressive feeling, a sense of foreboding that made the human uneasy. But he didn't leave. He stood at the edge of the clearing, waiting. His mind was a whirl of questions, questions that had been building ever since that first touch. What was she hiding? Why had she been cast out? What had she become? And then he felt it, the familiar electric pull in the air. She was near. He didn't need to see her to know she was there. He could feel her presence like a storm waiting to break. The human turned slowly, his senses heightened as he sought her out in the growing darkness. She stepped from the shadows, her form illuminated by the faint light of the distant storm. But this time something was different. She wasn't as calm as she usually was. Her posture was tense, her eyes filled with a turbulent mix of fear and determination. "You came," she said, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. There was something urgent in her tone, a sense that something was about to happen. "I've been waiting for you," he replied, his voice steady but filled with concern. "What's wrong? You seem different tonight." She hesitated, looking around as if searching for something or someone. The wind ruffled her hair, and the trees around them seemed to groan under the weight of the approaching storm. The tension in the air was palpable. "I can't keep running," she said suddenly, her voice raw with emotion. "I've been hiding for so long, afraid of what I am, afraid of what I could do. But I can't run anymore. The time has come." The human's heart raced. What did she mean? He had seen her as a mystery, something alien and unreachable. But now he was faced with something deeper, something darker. What had she been running from? And why had she chosen this moment to reveal it? She took a step toward him, and the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. The storm raged on above them, but in that moment all he could focus on was her, the way she stood there, vulnerable yet resolute. "I'm not what you think I am," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I was changed, altered by a power I didn't understand. A power that's still inside me, a force that could destroy everything if I lose control." The human took a step forward, his hand outstretched. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever it is, I'll help you." Her eyes flickered with doubt, and for a moment she seemed to retreat inward like she was fighting a battle with herself. "You don't know what you're asking," she said softly. "You think you understand, but you don't. I've lived with this power for centuries, and it's never been kind. Every time I think I've controlled it, it grows stronger." The human could feel the weight of her words, the truth in them, but something deep inside him told him not to pull away. He couldn't turn his back on her now, not when he felt a connection so deep that it transcended the very nature of their existence. I don't need to understand everything, he said, his voice unwavering. I just need to know that you trust me. Trust me to help you, trust me to be here. For a long moment, the alien stared at him, her expression unreadable. The storm raged on and the wind howled, but neither of them moved. And then, in a quiet, almost imperceptible motion, she stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, and for the first time, she placed it on his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady. She was close now, so close that he could feel the heat radiating from her, the energy that seemed to pulse through her skin. I've never trusted anyone, she whispered, her voice fragile, but I trust you. Her words struck him with the force of a revelation. Trust. It was something she had never known, something she had never been willing to give, and now she was offering it to him. The human closed his eyes for a moment, letting the reality of her words settle over him. It wasn't just her trust she was giving him, it was her fear, her loneliness, her pain. Everything she had hidden from the world for so long was now being laid bare before him. I won't let you go, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Whatever happens, we face it together. And with that promise, the storm seemed to intensify. The wind howled louder. The thunder cracked across the sky, and the trees around them shook under the fury of the storm. But in the midst of it all, there was a strange calm between them, a bond that had been forged in the fire of their shared vulnerability. The alien outcast looked at the human, her eyes wide with uncertainty, but also with something new, hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving. The storm raged on, but together they stood firm, facing whatever the future held. They were no longer two strangers, two beings from different worlds. They were something more. They were a promise to each other, a shared commitment to face the unknown no matter what came. The storm had passed, but its effects lingered. The air was still thick with humidity, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. The forest around them, once alive with the sounds of wind and rain, now felt eerily quiet, as though it too was holding its breath. The human stood there, feeling the weight of the moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien outcast had not moved, her presence still as powerful as it had been when she first stepped into the clearing. But now there was something different in her, an uncertain tension in the way she held herself, as if she were preparing to face something far greater than either of them could understand. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The human, his hand still resting on her arm, could feel the tremor in her skin. She was trembling, but not from the cold or the storm. She was trembling from the weight of the choice that lay before her. The alien had opened herself to him, had shared the truth of her powers, the fear she had carried for centuries. And now she was faced with a decision that could change the course of both their lives. I don't know what's happening to me, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the quiet of the forest. The power inside me, it's growing stronger. I can feel it like it's pulsing through my veins. I don't know how much longer I can control it. The human's chest tightened at her words. He had known this moment would come. He had known that the deeper they went into each other's worlds, the more dangerous things would become. But he had never imagined it would be like this. She had warned him. She had told him that her power was beyond anything he could understand. But now it was real, and it was terrifying. Listen to me, he said, his voice steady but filled with concern. I know you're afraid, but you don't have to face this alone. I'm here. I promised you that. The alien's eyes flickered with something, pain, hope, regret, and she shook her head. You don't understand. You can't understand what it's like to have this power inside you, to know that you could lose control at any moment. If I lose control, I could destroy everything. I could destroy you. Her words cut through him like a blade. The idea that she might hurt him, that her power could destroy him, was something he hadn't been prepared for. But as much as he wanted to pull away, as much as the fear tried to take root in his heart, he knew he couldn't. Not now, not after everything they had shared. You won't lose control, he said, his voice firm, filled with an unwavering belief that surprised even him. I believe in you. I know you can control it. We'll face it together. We'll find a way. But she only looked at him, her eyes dark with doubt. You can't promise that. I've seen what happens when I lose control. I've seen the destruction it causes, the lives it takes. I can't let that happen again. Not to you. The human stepped closer to her, his heart in his throat. The weight of her words was crushing, but there was something in his chest, something deep inside, that refused to let go of the hope he had come to feel. "I'm not afraid of you," he said softly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I'm afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of walking away from this before we've even had the chance to see where it could go." The alien flinched at his touch, but it wasn't because of him. It was because of the turmoil that raged inside her. She had spent so long running from her past, hiding from her own powers, that now, when she was finally faced with the choice to move forward, she wasn't sure she could. She didn't know if she could face herself, let alone anyone else. The human's words echoed in her mind. "I'm not afraid of you." He didn't see her as the monster she had become. He didn't see the darkness that clung to her like a shadow. He saw her as she was now, as a person, not as the destructive force she feared herself to be. For the first time, she felt something inside her stir, a flicker of hope. It was fragile, like a flame in a storm, but it was there. She had lived in the shadows for so long, too afraid to trust anyone, to let anyone in. But this human, this blind, strange man who could not even see her, had come to understand her in a way that no one else had. And it was that understanding, that acceptance, that made her question everything she had believed. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "I've spent my life running from this power, from the fear of what I could become. But now I don't know if I can control it. I don't know if I can keep it locked inside." The human stood before her, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, the alien stood silent, her mind racing, her heart torn between the fear of what she could become and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be something more than the monster she believed herself to be. She had spent so many years running from her own power, afraid of what it might do, that she had never stopped to think about what it might be capable of if controlled. The human's words, his promise, rang in her ears. "I'm not afraid of you." And for the first time in her life, she began to believe him. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand. The touch was gentle, unsure, but it was a beginning. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. "I don't know what comes next," she said softly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But I want to try. For you. For us." And with those words, the storm that had raged inside her began to settle. The fear, the self-doubt, the anger, everything she had been carrying for so long began to fade into the background. It wasn't gone, not completely, but it was no longer the force that controlled her. Together, they stood in the quiet aftermath of the storm, facing an uncertain future. But for the first time, the alien didn't feel like she was facing it alone.